Okay. My name is Claire Frampton, and this presentation is about Shakespeare and anti-oil sponsorship protests, the story of BP or not BP. Anti-oil sponsorship group BP or not BP, originally known as the Reclaim Shakespeare Company, campaign against oil sponsorship of arts in the UK. This is through the belief that sponsorship of arts by the fossil fuel industry is unacceptable because of the contribution to climate change by this industry. The theatrical protests have involved reworking elements of Shakespeare against sponsorship of BP of performances of the plays of Shakespeare and other aspects of culture in the UK, including exhibitions in the British Museum. The name of the group is a quote from Hamlet, to be or not to be, Act 3, Scene 1. Academic Susan Bennett considered the protest since 2012 in her 2016 paper, Sponsoring Shakespeare. Bennett's paper discusses issues which were recent at the time, notably corporate involvement in the World Shakespeare Festival, part of the Cultural Olympiad 2012, which she writes was conspicuous. She looks at instrumental uses of Shakespeare for multinational companies who make it part of their business to underwrite cultural performances and exhibitions. Bennett explains that in 2012, BP needed to develop its brand image because of then recent negative press relating to the environmental impact of its activities. BP was declared a sustainability partner and the official oil and gas partner of the 2012 Games, and protests about this arrangement was organised by groups including Greenpeace UK. BP was a founding presenting partner of the World Shakespeare Festival. Bennett writes that this refocused the attention of the once national petroleum company for British people and British culture rather than on its environmental misadventures. The Reclaim Shakespeare Company was part of the movement against this and staged their first protest during the 2012 World Shakespeare Festival. Their first short intervention took place before the tempest at the Royal Shakespeare Company's theatre in Stratford. Bennett wrote that in the 2-minute protest, 2 actors jumped on stage and performed a parody that matched up well-known lines from Shakespeare's plays to critique BP's environmental practices, asking audience members to rip the BP logo from theatre programmes. This intervention integrated physical involvement with printed materials. The BP or not BP website hosts short films documenting the performance protests from 2012, including the first protests. In terms of the integration of reference to Shakespeare in more recent protests, this paper will explore what's effective about the ways the protests have blended elements of Shakespeare, what has been the relationship to contemporary events and current affairs. The Reclaim Shakespeare Company began to operate under the name BP or not BP, as its protest themes developed to include sponsorship of culture outside Shakespeare. Case studies. In 2017, there was a protest on the Royal Shakespeare Company stage against BP sponsorship for a performance of Antony and Cleopatra. The BP or not BP website describes this protest as an unexpected warm-up act, where an actor made a speech pretending to be a spokesperson for BP, who was then interrupted by an actor playing William Shakespeare who expresses his dismay about this issue. Information from the BP or not BP website. The RSC has recently signed a new 5-year sponsorship deal with BP. Media coverage of the protest included an article on the stage website, Anti-BP protesters target Royal Shakespeare Company, again, which focused on the fact that BP was sponsoring the RSC £5 ticket for young people scheme, a scheme designed to develop passion for Shakespeare. The stage quoted Dara Martin, who played the BP spokesperson in the protest, saying how the RSC inspired him to learn Shakespeare, and that productions were fiercely political and they cared about bringing Shakespeare to wide audiences, so he was crushed to see the RSC accept BP sponsorship. The article also quotes actress Phoebe Deminger, who played Shakespeare in the protest, as stating that as a lifelong lover of Shakespeare, I'm deeply saddened that young people's access to great theatre must be tainted by an oil company that directly profits from the from compromising our collective future. Masso 2017. In 2018, a protest took place in the RSC courtyard in Stratford upon Avon. The BP or Not BP website states that this was a 5-hour rebel festival on the Royal Shakespeare Company's front doorstep. A page about the protest describes the style of performance. More than 70 performers took part in a day of unsanctioned performances outside RSC venues, culminating in a musical invention of the theatre foyer and a guerrilla production. The Rebel Festival featured a mischievous mob of Shakespearean characters, live music, poets, wrestling clowns, and a Shakespearean insult booth. A film about the protest documents how the creative performances blended historical and contemporary ideas. Acts included guys wearing Shakespearean-style ruffs in the colours of the BP logo, yellow and green, with modern suits. When I interviewed Danny Chivers of BP or Not BP in March 2021, he stated that it was really great to have a full day where we had all these different performances, some by us, some with our partner groups and allies, that were able to pull out these different threads, and for some of it to happen through just direct Shakespearean style performance. The BP or Not BP Rebel Festival took place at the same time as the RSC's Mischief Festival, which took place at the Other Place Theatre in Stratford-upon-Avon. The official Mischief Festival itself featured a double bill of plays about freedom of protest and freedom of speech. The BP or Not BP protest outside the Other Place aimed to highlight the hypocrisy of the RSC staging plays on these topics while partnering with BP. Information from the BP or Not BP website. This example demonstrates the complex dynamics of the issue of BP art sponsorship, where it appears that BP sponsors freedom of speech. However, it's argued this is not the case across its portfolio of global activity. In 2019, the RSC dropped BP as a sponsor. To give an example from the media profile of this story, an October 2019 Guardian article, Royal Shakespeare Company to end BP sponsorship deal, states that this decision was made to end the deal earlier than the full length of the 5-year deal announced in 2017. This was amid growing opposition to fossil fuel companies' sponsorship of many of the UK's leading cultural institutions. It can be judged that the declaration of the climate emergency by cultural institutions had affected public opinion. The Guardian article explains that the ending of the deal related to the climate emergency and that sponsorship by fossil fuel companies of arts does not fit with the contemporary values of young people. It quotes a joint statement by Gregory Dorian, the RSC's artistic director, and Catherine Malyon, its executive director, that the decision was taken after an internal debate. Young people were saying that they did not want to be part of the festival, and this couldn't be ignored. In a 2019 report on the BP or Not BP website stated that this is a massive victory and testament to the energy, commitment and creative involvement of huge numbers of people over the last 7 years. This success happened within a wider change of a culture relating to art sponsorship. Since then, BP or Not BP have continued their protests about sponsorship at other venues, for instance, the British Museum and festivals, the name of the group keeping the original reference to Shakespeare. When I interviewed Danny Chivers from BP or Not BP in March 2021, he stated that I feel as though there's a way our group will always have this strong connection to Shakespeare through our founding, our initial principles, the fact that, you know, it was Shakespeare that kind of gave us something to play with to begin with, and that inspired our imagination and got the group going and got so many people involved and excited and brought so many people in, and it's in our name and it will always be there. But actually we do always really try to stick every performance and every script and every action to the theme of what's in front of us at that moment. He said that where we tend to use Shakespeare now isn't so much in our new performances, it's when we're telling the story of what we've done and what the group is. This has included performances at festivals where the group have an hour-long performance of a show that showcases the best of various performances. Shakespeare forms a major part of that because it works on stage. Other aspects of the group's past performances are harder to stage in this context because they have involved aspects such as complex puppets. Chivers stated that the Shakespeare stuff is fantastic for telling our story and for giving that example, and that's where it comes back to life. Thank you.